Here's something I want you to think about. Do you want to be a real yoga teacher or just an exercise teacher? Let's talk about it. Step one is to know your craft. You have to understand the intricacies, the alignment concepts of yoga, not just throwing out instructions and commands to your classroom. Warrior two, triangle, standing separate leg, head to knee, and then just hope that they get into the pose properly, and then you bring them out to the next pose and expressing the alignment concepts to them in a way that they will hear it. Because when you're in, and I talk about this a lot of times in my video, if you're in a repeated pattern of speech, what I call the teacher voice, they're not going to hear you. They're going to tune you out. If you get into that exercise teacher cadence, they're not even listening to what you're saying. You want your words to actually cut through, and then they can have those aha moments. And how are they going to do that? By you understanding the alignment concepts, the true intricacies of the pose, and expressing it properly to your students. So know your craft. Whatever style of yoga you're teaching. I teach hot yoga, which comes from the Bikram world, comes from the Vishnu Ghosh world. I know alignment concept. I've been studying it for 40 years now and diving in. So how are you going to be able to do that? You want to first of all find a teacher, find somebody that you can connect to that has credibility. If you want me to be your teacher, by the way, in the old days you'd have to live in Fort Lauderdale. Now with technology, you can join the Barkan Method On Demand membership or the Barkan Method On Demand teacher training program. I'll put links in the description below. And if you're enjoying this video, hit the like button right now. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, push the subscribe button right now and the notification bell so you get notified when I post a new video. And any comments you have, any questions you have about my teacher training program, just about yoga in general, put them down below. I get to all the comments. And one of the things that I do on my teacher training programs is tutorial every single pose from the beginning modifications to the advanced amplifications, everything you need to know to get into that pose. And as a teacher, you should have that understanding. Whatever posture you're teaching, whatever type of yoga you're teaching, you should know the beginning modifications, especially if somebody is injured. You should know where most of your students are, somewhere in the middle between beginning and advanced, and definitely have an understanding, if you can't do it yourself, at least an understanding of where the advanced level is and how you can take your students to that next advanced level. So having that concept of beginning modifications, intermediate concepts, and especially advanced concepts gives you that credibility that you can teach anybody. And I do have lots of tutorials on YouTube. The tutorials on YouTube are more geared towards students. The tutorials in my teacher training program are more geared toward teachers teaching students. So whatever style of yoga you teach, you want to seek out the best. Find a senior teacher that can take you to that next level, and then you start to study and learn it. Know your craft.
I learned from the best.
Step two, know the history. That's one of my big passions. If you've taken my yoga teacher training program, you know I'm very passionate about the history of yoga in general. From the very beginning, we talk about the Vedas, we talk about the Upanishads. As we get through to the Bhagavad Gita, as we get to Patanjali and his Yoga Sutras, and then we get to the Tantric path with Matsyendra and Goraksha and the beginning of Hatha Yoga and how they're different, how they build from each other, and understanding the basis of history is going to set you apart from most yoga teachers that are just exercise teachers, just throwing out commands to the students, trying to speak up over loud music. Now, I'm not making that wrong. When I teach my Barkan Method Hot Vinyasa class, we have a very special song that we play for the 5th Vinyasa. We crank it up. It's fun. It's great for the energy. I'm not saying that that's wrong. I'm just saying have credibility behind the words and the commands that you're throwing out to your students, throwing out to your classroom. So yes, understanding the history of yoga is so important, but also understanding the history of your yoga, your particular style of yoga. If you're an Iyengar teacher, you should know all about Krishnamacharya, who was Iyengar's guru. You should know about Pattabhi Jois, who was also a colleague and a contemporary of Iyengar, and also about Desikachar, who was Krishnamacharya's son. It's a whole different concept from a different style of yoga. From the hot yoga world, and Bikram was my teacher, Vishnu Ghosh is really the founder of what we now call hot yoga, and understanding his concept.
Very interesting.
He had booklets and pictures and videos, and if you study from the masters, it sets you apart. So understanding your particular style of yoga is key, but also understanding the different styles and how they all come to play. I did a recent video called The Different Styles of Yoga. Check that out after you watch this one. But having an appreciation without judgment. And I did another video on what's wrong with yoga today, and the main point was that many people do one particular style of yoga, they make another style of yoga wrong. Non-judgment is just as much part of the yogic philosophy as what you're doing alignment concept-wise. So embracing the different styles of yoga, understanding them, just like a priest would understand all the different types of religion, a rabbi would study comparative religion, even though it's not the religion of their choice, but they're theologians, so they understand the subject. Be a student of the history. So the point is, be a student, not just history of yoga, but the history of your style of yoga. Step 3, and that's take your yoga off the mat. A very famous yoga teacher, a good friend of mine named Sean Korn, she has a whole organization called Off the Mat Into the World. Many times people will come into a yoga class, they do their practice, they roll up their mat, they get into the car, and they're driving home and somebody cuts them off. They get irate, they get enraged, they start to scream, they blow their horn.
Move your garbage can!
Many times I'll tell people at the end of my class in the last Shavasana, I'll say, remember this moment. Send that light to each person in this room. This is the perfect time for Shavasana. It's the perfect time for meditation, because your mind and your body, especially if you're doing the athletic style of yoga that we do in hot yoga, is just you're tired, you're exhausted. So now it's about letting go and just getting yourself centered, and it's really about finding the moment. I believe it's the most opportune time to find your present moment right after the practice. You're in Shavasana, and I tell my students, okay, now remember this moment. Take this moment with you whenever you need it. If somebody does cut you off if you're in your car on your way home, you're going to find your center. Ask my family, they'll say, blow your horn at that guy, and most of the time I don't. Every now and then I might get thrown off, but not that often. I try to keep my center. Yogi, here's a great expression for yoga. The yogi is happy for no reason. The true joy that the yogi finds in his heart, you don't become enlightened by having the perfect wife or the perfect husband, the perfect child, the perfect job, the perfect house. You find this contentment we call in yoga santosha. We find this centeredness. We're not thrown by the external. Deepak Chopra has a great saying. He says, the yogi is self-referred, not object-referred, meaning we're not looking at the objects to determine our peace of mind, not looking at the objects to determine our state of centeredness, our Zen state. We're looking within. So let's sum it up. Number 1, know your craft. Understand the postures from beginning modifications through advanced amplifications. Be a student of the alignment concepts and the postures that you teach. You don't want to be teaching a posture just because you learned it in a class. You want to be certified in that particular pose, and that's how you become a better teacher of those poses. Number 2, know the history, not just the history of yoga, which is definitely an important thing, which many of the teachers do not take time to do. That's why they continue to stay in that exercise teacher side, but understanding the history of yoga and the history of your yoga, understanding what your lineage is all about, and embrace that. And number 3, take your yoga practice off the mat, into your world, into your life, and live your yoga. Find your center. So that's our episode for today. Thank you so much for watching. If you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing, hit the notification bell. Any comments, put them down below. I get to all the comments, and I'll see you at the next video. Bye, guys.